The grand finale of our Amalgam series culminates with our own amalgamations. What characters have we created nearly 30 years after the fact? Find out soon as the Byword starts now. Welcome to episode 166 of the Nerd Byword. We have spent the past 3 episodes revisiting 1996's first set of Amalgam comics, a rare joint effort between DC and Marvel. And while we'd love to stay and peruse the 1997 slate of titles, it's high time we return to the present before we get pelted by pogs, bombarded with Beanie Babies, or submerge ourselves in Surge. Maybe next time, true believers. Instead, we have decided to give the idea of an Amalgam comic book a much-needed shot in the arm to update it from the dregs of 90s nostalgia. But more on that after our weekly update in... Nerd News! Dave, you can't stop raving about this, so the floor is indeed yours.
So, as of recording, BBC has just released a full-length cinematic trailer for the upcoming Doctor Who 60th anniversary celebration, which I have to say has got me about as stoked as anything in a long time. So, what we're looking at right now is a series of 3 specials that are supposed to air, as of my understanding right now, either sometime later this year or early next, although no official date has been announced yet. And these 3 specials are going to serve as a bridge into the next full series of Doctor Who. So what's really cool is that there's a whole lot of moving parts going on here. It is probably not out of place to say that the Jodie Whittaker era of Doctor Who was sort of a mixed bag in a lot of ways, through no fault of her, as I thought her performance was absolutely stellar. But there was a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff. There was some dissatisfaction with some of the writing. It's been sort of an up and down, back and forth, and the fan base of Doctor Who was pretty divided. And although I found a lot to enjoy in that era, it is probably fair to say that quite a bit of the excitement has sort of drained in recent years out of the franchise. So now that the showrunner is moving on, the actor is moving on, and it's time for sort of a reset again, they actually have brought back Russell T Davies, the man who revitalized Doctor Who to begin with after several decades of absence, to kind of do his thing again. And the very first thing he decided to do is have these 3 specials, these 3 special episodes that will actually revisit David Tennant in the role of the Doctor, probably one of the most popular people in the role since the sort of modern Doctor Who era. And he's going to pick up on sort of a loose thread with one of the Doctor's companions, Donna Noble, whose mind was wiped, and if she ever remembers the Doctor, it could, literally kill her. And apparently they're going to re-encounter each other here. What's also really cool is that, Russell T Davies is not just, doing a greatest hits tour here. He's definitely using this opportunity and the love that people have for the Tennant version of the Doctor as a way to, generate some hype again. But then he's launching into a new series that will feature Ncuti Gatwa as the new Doctor, which is super exciting casting, I think. And a lot of the stuff that we've seen coming out of that, some promo images and the like, is actually really, really exciting as well. So we're getting sort of a 3 special nostalgia tour, and then to launch into a different and new direction with the franchise. So there's a lot to be excited about as a Doctor Who fan. Tennant is easily in my top 3 of the people that have portrayed the Doctor. So seeing him sort of do a little, victory lap, I guess, as the character is going to be really cool. Revisiting Donna Noble as a character, I think, is going to be really cool. One of my favorite companions of the modern era. And then just launching into this new direction. I think this trailer is just oozes typical Russell T Davies sort of production values and how he approaches storytelling and going big and going epic. And this just looks really like a lot of fun, and hopefully will be something that can sort of satisfy the fan base a little bit again and generate some excitement for the franchise, which has, been, I guess, waning a little bit excitement wise since the days of sort of the Matt Smith era. I'd like to see that level of hype and popularity to kind of rest on Doctor Who again, because it is a fantastic show.
For all intents and purposes, I should be like a huge Doctor Who fan. I always have like this. I have like this weird peripheral relationship with the franchise, and even more so the people involved in it. Um, I think probably the biggest one is Peter Capaldi. One of the all time greatest acting performances in BBC's The Musketeers, a franchise, and I don't even know if that's an intellectual property. Alexander Dumas being my favorite author of all time, and seeing it finally faithfully well done. The Chris O'Donnell, all due respect to Oliver Platt, Chris O'Donnell, and Kiefer Sutherland, that was not it. That was not the vibe. Um, there were fun elements to it. Anytime Oliver Platt shows up, it's usually a good time. But that was not it. Um, the less said about the Logan Lerman franchise, and no disrespect to that man, but a regrettable incarnation of the Percy Jackson uh, franchise there, and Three Musketeers. Logan Lerman, unfortunately, is where your franchise goes to die. Just does not do well. But I finally got good Musketeers content, and one of the principal reasons, the entire cast is out of this world spectacular. But Peter Capaldi was like the driving force behind that as Cardinal Richelieu, and so he left. They killed him off after the first season, um, so he could go be Doctor Who. And I'm still kind of, I guess, protesting that, and that's maybe a silent, unknown, unspoken factor as to why I haven't dove deep into Doctor Who. But David Tennant, I told you I love what he's doing as Hu Yang again in Ahsoka. Um, he's popped up here and there and stuff that I've seen and always have enjoyed his work. Matt Smith, I love him in House of the Dragon. I mean, there's just so many, and I love what I saw of those first 5 or 6 episodes of the Chris Eccleston season. Billy Piper is a vibe. I love Rose Tyler as a POV character. Like, she's a baddie. Love her. It's just, man, dipping your toe into that, and sometimes you come back, at least like you dip your toe in it, and it comes out as gloop and like this ooze because of the thing that really kind of was like whoa was those aliens that were unzipping humans as their skin suits. It was, I could even look past the stretchy skin lady with the lotion, but man, those, oh boy, it was pretty gross. And so I should give it another college try, if you will, especially with everything surrounding this, because as much as a fan I am of things like Sherlock and Musketeers and BBC content, it makes all the sense that I would be interested in this.
And I will say, and this is, a much debated topic, like what is the perfect entry point for Doctor Who? And to me, the perfect entry point is, in the modern era at least, the first Matt Smith season. I think you can go back and enjoy a lot of the earlier stuff very easily, and the Tennant era is fantastic as well as far as like modern era goes. And you can go back and watch the original stuff too. I mean, I have watched I've watched a lot of Doctor Who from all eras. But I think there is something almost like 0 point. Like you don't need to know anything to run into the first Matt Smith episode, and it does a great job, like really setting up his version of the Doctor and who the Doctor is and building relationships. And I think it's just a really great entry point. So if you want to give it that try again, I would say try that, because I think the Matt Smith era, there's something really special, especially about that first season. It's really it's a really remarkable piece of work. All right, Chris, so what do you have for news for us this week?
Well, one of our all-time favorite titles is back. Ultimate Spider-Man has returned, kind of spilling out over Jonathan Hickman's kind of rebirth to the Ultimate Universe and Ultimate Invasion. And Hickman himself is going to be writing Ultimate Spider-Man. Details are scarce right now, but we do that Marco Cicchetto of Daredevil fame, from Chip Zdarsky's Daredevil, is going to do the art in there. So, I mean, if nothing else, you know that it's going to look good. So we have scarce details. We're supposed to get more. As time progresses, I think they are looking at New York Comic Con was the original solicit of when we get more information, but details are incredibly scarce right now. We don't even know who this Spider-Man is going to be. Is it Peter? Is it Miles? Is it someone else entirely? And it's going to be really, really interesting too, how much leeway they're going to allow him to have with the Spider-Man character in this new Ultimate Universe, because this was something you and I were just talking about yesterday, that we feel strongly Peter Parker is in captivity, and his captors are Marvel's editorial. He cannot progress. Our friend Ash from X of Words calls it the Peter Pan Parker. He cannot progress past a certain point, and if and when he does, it immediately regresses back to, I think you said, this 70s era man-child where he's emotionally stunted, and he can only go so far. His relationships are limited, and once they pass a certain threshold, they go back to a 0 point. And so it'd be really interesting if Hickman is being given free rein here to kind of do something completely different with Peter, if he's going to bring Miles back to the Ultimate Universe, or a different Miles, or what's going on here. But there's just so much that we don't know. Or if he wants to create a completely different character, so he's not handcuffed to the Peter Parker of it all, in the continuity. So I'm definitely, Hickman is someone that I always enjoy reading. It can be daunting. Screen Rant made a good point in the article that I read, that by comparison, the cinematic franchise is, Spider-Verse wise, is a vast, just leaps and bounds better than the comics counterpart that actually inspired it. It's one of those rare things. I was telling a kid, one of our students was talking about it, and I was like, it's one of those rare occasions that the product is better than the source material. The Spider-Verse is a thrilling idea comics wise, but it's never really been executed well. The first Spider-Verse event was okay. It was fun and it introduced some new characters, but there wasn't anything really substantive that came from that. It didn't lean enough on Moreland, who I think is a fantastic, when he was first introduced, in the JMS run, was a fascinating new adversary. And I was
Moreland, if you don't mind me saying, to me is one of the best examples of a character with diminishing returns, because when he first showed up, he was such a great threat and so interesting and mysterious and everything. And then the more they explained about him, he's basically the runt of the litter, and running away from people and scared now in his most recent appearances. And it's just become regrettably sort of a joke character because they weren't able to maintain that sense of menace. It's one of the great failures, I think, of modern Spider-Man comics, that they were not able to, piggyback on that initial appearance and keep that level of threat and menace going with him,
Yeah. And so, I say all that to say this, I love Hickman's work in the Ultimate Universe. In fact, some of that, it's hard to pick, because it's like, what child do you love the most with some of this stuff? But I really enjoyed his stuff in the Ultimate Universe, and that's kind of why punting back and reading Mark Millar stuff was like, what is this? This is not what I enjoyed about the Ultimate Universe. So I'm excited to see him back in this playground, as I have been with Ultimate Invasion, but particularly with Ultimate Spider-Man.
Yeah, I'm very, very conflicted about this particular situation. I'm going to be honest with you, Chris, because Ultimate Spider-Man, the original, Ultimate Spider-Man, was such a hallmark moment in my life. The series that, after a lapse in reading comic books, really brought me back into the fold and sort of launched me into, basically reading comic books pretty much uninterrupted ever since I first encountered that. And I think I jumped on the series as of like issue 7 or 8 or something like that. And I just never looked back. I got the whole collection downstairs in my basement in my comic book room. And it's a very seminal series on a personal level for me. One of my favorite versions of Peter Parker in a lot of ways. One of my favorite versions of Mary Jane. One of my favorite versions of the Green Goblin. Yes, I actually like how he transforms in this.
I do too. I love it.
I think there's something very cool about there being a physical transformation part with it. There's so many good things that came out of Ultimate Spider-Man. And even when they made the decision, to kill off the Peter Parker character, which I admit, was not something I enjoyed because I'm such a big fan of that version of the character. I did appreciate ultimately what, pun intended, what came out of that with the Miles Morales character, and his run on Ultimate Spider-Man. At least the initial run I read, the initial run of his, I really enjoyed as well. So this can go any number of ways. It can be Ultimate Spider-Man in name only, and it's a whole new character or something completely different. It could be a return of Miles Morales to that universe, although I find that difficult to believe that they would remove Miles out of the main universe at this point.
I think that's the least likely outcome.
Yeah. Or we get, Peter Parker back, Ultimate Peter Parker. But here I think it is important. It is important to note that we just don't know enough about this yet to have any kind of excitement for it. When you say Ultimate Spider-Man is coming back, then the initial reaction, I think, from fans is, we're getting a continuation of the story of Ultimate Peter Parker. But this might not be that. And even if it is a story of a ultimate version of Peter Parker, it might not be the same version of what we saw before. As somebody who's been reading Ultimate Invasion, I still have no idea where that thing is going, and it only has one issue left to go as of recording. Like, nothing that they have shown seems to have even anything remotely to do with the Ultimate Universe. Like, it's just a maker, like, trying to manipulate a universe to make his own or something. But nothing in there feels like the Ultimate Universe in any recognizable way, shape, or form. So whatever comes out of this, out of the other end, is it going to be the Ultimate Universe as it was before? Is it going to be something new? Is it going to be something different? Are we going to see a Peter Parker Spider-Man again? Is it going to be the same Peter Parker Spider-Man that we had in Ultimate Spider-Man? There's so many unknowns here. So if you were to stand up and say, this is a whole new interpretation of a Spider-Man character, I'll check it out, I guess. If you tell me this is Miles Morales back in the Ultimate Universe, my reaction would be, why? I mean, you kind of tied yourself into a pretzel here, getting him into the main universe. So why would you try to undo that? Now, if you were to tell me this is a return of Ultimate Peter Parker, and it's going to treat the previous Ultimate Spider-Man series as canon, and it's just a continuation of that character, I admit that would be the thing that would get me excited about this series, because I love that version of Peter Parker. But it's very difficult to predict right now what this is.
I think it's interesting to note, too, is typically with Hickman stuff, he usually does either a team book or like some other type of grandiose thing, which lends itself because of his writing style, where everything is so macro. Everything is so detail-oriented with the data pages that feel like homework and things of that nature. And so to make it a one singular titular character and a character-driven book, not a team book, not like an overarching universe-level book like Ultimate Invasion or something of that nature. I think that's fascinating. He hasn't done something like that to my memory. Maybe I'm forgetting something. Please correct me, since Ultimate Thor, which was a great one. Loved his Ultimate Thor. But yeah, so that's I think another fascinating element too. Just like, is he kind of scaling himself down here? Is this a long-term project? Because I did see in one of the interviews, like he's like, when I'm done with it, I'm going to be done with it. And so how long is this series going to run?
Unsure. Lots of unknowns at this point. Wait and see.
And I think one of the important questions to ask too, it's the age-old question: can you go home again? And this is something that both big publishers like to do. I can't speak as much to DC doing it as you do, as you can, is they love circling back to events from the past. With DC, it's crisis this, you have a crisis, I have a crisis, we all have a crisis. But with Marvel, it's reusing old crossover events at the very least, and like kind of just playing with that. I don't even know if it's nostalgia, but like this almost cyclical nature of, you have like Secret Wars was reused, you have Inferno that was reused. So can you go home again is another age old question when it comes to comics.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So even if it is a continuation of the original Ultimate Spider-Man run, is it going to be, the same kind of feeling or experience? Yeah, that's difficult to predict.
All right, that wraps up Nerd News. What are your reactions to both the Doctor Who 60th anniversary trailer and the news that Ultimate Spider-Man returns? Hit us up on socials at Nerd Byword. But when we come back from our first break, our Byword Big Talk takes us into our own amalgamations. Welcome back to the main course of this episode. We call it our Byword. And we've been cooking up our own amalgamation characters over the past couple of weeks as we look back at the 1996 series. And as previously stated, there was a second series of books. I found that out in my research in 1997. So that may be a future episode, like a amalgam revisited, if you will. But we each have 3 characters that we have blended together, and including a creative team, because we always love, as creators, we love giving and showing love to our creators. And it'd be really interesting to see that the new creators that have, especially in recent years, kind of tackle these kind of classic themes and kind of merge these new characters together. So, Dave, who is your first amalgam?
So I did a little bit of research on this one. And of course, needless to say, I can't find anybody or anything online that agrees on how to pronounce this word. But I thought it would be cool to take the two most, let's say, positive, newer characters that were created by both Marvel and DC. I'm talking about Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan, and Stephanie Brown, Batgirl, and merge them into one. And I thought that the obvious thing is you'd want to keep the Pakistani Muslim background of the character, because I think that's one of the most interesting and cool things about Kamala Khan. And so I thought the name of the hero could be Bat in Urdu, and I can't find anything that tells me for sure how to pronounce this. Shamgadar or Shamgadar? I don't know. I'm not sure, but it's a cool name, I think.
Pretty good. I'm not fluent, but that seems legit. Please correct
it. It seems legit. Please do. If anything, I need to be corrected when it comes to foreign languages. It's something I desperately need. Anyways, so I thought it would be cool to kind of blend all this together. So we have Kamala Brown, who is the daughter, much like Stephanie Brown, of a supervillain. When she discovers that she has special powers, she decides that she's going to get back at her dad by putting on a costume and going after him and trying to spoil, quote unquote, his attempts at being a criminal. I think there's just something really cool about both of these characters' outlook, and that no matter how crazy or wild things get around them, that they always have a really positive, upbeat attitude towards how they overcome these obstacles. Especially Stephanie Brown, the way she's shown in the Brian Q. Miller run, is just such an uplifting character to me. Full of positivity. And Kamala, even I've read the first issue of her new series where she's now a mutant, and even here in this absolutely crazy setup. You died, you're back, now you're mutant. She still has this incredibly upbeat, positive attitude and how she's tackling all this.
Where mutants are outlawed, and it's like the
Yeah.
end times for mutants, and she still
Yeah, and
is.
she's
I agree.
still is Kamala Khan, you know? And so putting those two characters together would, I think, be really cool. As far as who I'd love to write this thing creative team-wise, I think N.K. Jemisin would be awesome to have back on some kind of superhero book after her work on Far Sector. That still stands as one of my all-time favorite superhero books, period. So getting her on a character like this, I think, would be really cool. And as far as art, I don't think there's anything much better right now in the business than Dan Mora art. So that would be the creative team that I'd love to put on this character.
And I think that would be one thing, as I'm listening to your elevator pitch, if you will, is the family dynamic. Because if you're making this character's parent a supervillain, you think about, I immediately am drawn to the close-knit nature of Kamala Khan's family. So if you kind of bring that element into it where they're so close, and then you have the sting of the betrayal and the reveal of something, I think that would be fascinating.
I totally agree.
And I can't say enough about that creative team. Dan Mora draws so much of like my dream character. He's my favorite turtle artist. I would love to see him kind of, he only usually does it with the Power Ranger crossovers, but I would love to see him, have a couple of guest features on the IDW books, because I love the way he draws them. They're kind of lankier. It's such a cool design. They almost look like space aliens a little bit, and I absolutely.
Yeah, so continuing our personal amalgams, you already hinted at this one in our last episode when we briefly brought up our topic. I'd love to hear your elevator pitch for this one. Let's go.
So I went similar with you. What I love about these two characters is how close their family elements are. One of my favorite things about both of these characters, and I think it's such a smart change from the idiotic trope of secret identity being, keeping your superhero reveal or identity from your family and loved ones. I think it's the most tired thing of having to hide from your family. It's dumb. It's unnecessary. It's not very believable. And so having Miles Morales and Jaime Reyes both of their families in on it and supporting them as superheroes and encouraging them to do so because it's the right thing to do. And having that foundation immediately draws those characters together for me, not to mention two incredible Latino characters, and the representation. Now, we have one. Latino culture is not monolithic. I want to acknowledge that Miles is Puerto Rican, Black and Puerto Rican, and that Jaime is Mexican American. So, like, this is not, hey, we'll just take two Latino characters from different backgrounds and smush them together. I think that can be beautifully be represented in other ways, because you have very many, diverse backgrounds, even, with I have friends who are Puerto Rican and Cuban, or who are Colombian and Venezuelan. And so I think that would be kind of fascinating to infuse all of that culture and background and upbringing into a character. And you could flip it either way. I kind of ping-ponged it back and forth, either Scarab Spider or Spider Scarab, either one. Just the costume potentials alone is fascinating. And look no further than Cody Ziegler as the writer, who's done an incredible job on this new Miles Morales run, and friend of the show, our first professional interview, Luciano Vecchio, who has done some incredible, new costume designs for characters. Just a huge fan of their work. And kind of like that animated kind of style, I think lends itself perfectly to like these young teenage heroes, and it would be so much fun.
Yeah, sold. I'm here for this. I love both of these characters. I have a big soft spot for Jaime Reyes Blue Beetle, particular, because he came along at a time where he was almost like DC's answer to Ultimate Spider-Man. So it makes perfect sense to literally have him become one, if you will, with Ultimate Spider-Man. So and I love the creative team. So this sounds perfect, man.
All right, I'm definitely intrigued by your next one, and surprised that your writer was not on the previous character.
Yeah, I want Brian Q. Miller back writing comics. I'm not gonna lie, but sometimes you don't need to go home again, right? So I'd love to see him on something new again. But here's a really cool thing. One of the things that I set myself as a goal is to try to use as many sort of post 1990s created characters as possible in all of this, because a lot of these characters literally didn't exist when DC versus Marvel happened in 1996. So there was no way we were going to get any of this. It's a little more fun to me than just saying I'm going to take people that had been merged together previously and just remix them. I want to have a little bit more fun than that. So two characters that would be absolutely polar opposites, but would still be a really fun mix would be Ironheart, Riri Williams, and Miss Martian, Megan Moores. So my setup here basically is that I merge Martian Manhunter and Iron Man, and that is sort of her, I guess, if you will, her mentor. But the idea is that she is a character who's raised by her uncle, who does not know that she's actually a Martian and that her uncle is a Martian manhunter, basically like space cop, so to speak, and wears a special, Iron Man style armor when he's on the job. And then, he is incapacitated and she has to use her know-how and, her newfound Martian abilities to repair the armor and go and after the people that attacked him. So very, very simple sort of setup, just basic merging together of these backgrounds. I really like the idea of acknowledging, maybe for a change, that just because somebody is a space alien in a superhero comic book doesn't mean that they can run off into battle half naked, like just because they're from another planet doesn't mean they're automatically like superheroes, right? So having a Martian that has to wear a special armor like this, I think, is a really interesting setup. You can have a lot of fun with the Martian point of shape shifting, sure. But that is not, within self, something that makes you, invulnerable or be able to fly or anything like that. And for that, the armor is still required. So I also like the idea of setting up a situation where this character is a Martian that doesn't know that she's a Martian, and it's kind of like a part of her that she has to unlock. So the tech side is actually something she's a natural at, but understanding her own nature as an alien is really, the identity crisis of it all. I think that would be really interesting. And then just because I really think that there's something special with how he writes young characters and how they've tried to find their way. I would love to have Brian Q. Miller on writing for this one. And I want him somewhere. So Jamal Campbell needs to be in the mix, because his work recently on Superman just reminded me how awesome Far Sector was. And just there is nothing that Jamal Campbell can't do. And anytime that he decides to do interiors, I am in heaven. I know he does a lot more covers than interiors, but his interiors just sing. So I just want Jamal Campbell on some kind of amalgam interiors, and what better book to put him on than Iron Martian.
Well, that and that final point that you made right there with Jamal Campbell, I think is the most intriguing fact for me on this book, because I think back immediately to his work on Far Sector, and the detail-oriented nature of his aliens were just fascinating. Like there were times when I was reading Far Sector, I would just stare at the pages and kind of the glory that they are. Like, you have so many artists that, yes, they can draw humanoid type characters in a superhero comic book, but like to be that imaginative and that creative is just fascinating to me. And this is real intriguing one. Like, I'm always about aliens and Martians and little green men. So Martian Manhunter is always one, and I'm not as versed as I'd like to be in the Martian lore at DC Comics, but like I've always been a big John Jones fan. Miss Martian was okay in the Young Justice episodes that I saw. She was a little bit, I don't know if they had like some clueless vibes from the 90s or whatever, but she her heart was in the right place, but she had me kind of left shaking my head. And so I don't know near enough about her. And Riri Williams is another character that I need to dive into. The Ironheart series is something that has been on my to read list for a long time, so I'm definitely intrigued by this amalgam.
And I will say that Miss Martian in the comics is pretty different from the Miss Martian that you see in Young Justice. Young Justice is sort of very much its own thing. So I wouldn't go off of that as far as characterization goes, because as a character she is a wee bit different, let's say, in the comic books. All right, so this next one's got me really intrigued, Chris. What merging is occurring here?
Okay, so I tried to do the same thing that you did. Like that was I was like there's a reason that we're doing this episode, right? There's a reason that we are trying to move this forward to the present day, what present day amalgamations would look like. I'm not trying to combine Wolverine and Batman again. Like we've seen that. So I wanted newer characters, and characters that I knew enough about. That was a big thing too. To be honest, I feel pretty confident in my Marvel character knowledge. So I was scrolling through kind of the DC Universe Infinite. That is still such a mouthful to say. I think we gotta clean that up. But I was just like, you know what? I love Jessica Cruz, and I need to find a Jessica Cruz vehicle here. And then I thought, oh, like, who else do I love? That could be a good amalgamation there, and that was my driving point. And I love me some White Tiger. And Ava Ayala is the iteration of the character I'm most familiar with, so I'm giving you the Green Tiger. And I think combining the aspects of a Green Lantern ring and the art alone and the creativeness that you can have with the Green Lantern ring is just boundless. And then you have like the amulet, like tiger god influence of like this deity level thing. You amalgamize that with the Green Lantern ring. I think there's endless possibilities. I'm just thinking visually here. Like I didn't even spend a whole lot of time about what the backstory is or whatever. And again, I'm not trying to take two Latino characters and just eliminate their backgrounds. But rather kind of blend them into this amalgamation where it's additive and it's not reductive. And so I think Jessica Cruz being Mexican American, and I believe I'm almost certain Ava Ayala is Puerto Rican. I think that'd just be a beautiful thing to kind of blend those characters together, and you still have that immigrant story. You still have that powerful background of family and what have you. And then I needed our friend of the show, Stephanie Williams, to write something, and nobody writes a strong, badass female character like Stephanie Williams. Let me tell you, her work with Nubia is incredibly inspirational. I love what she's done with Monica Rambeau and her stuff at Marvel as well. So she's writing the Green Tiger for me. And then one of the like stop and stare, remember where you were comics that I previously commended was that Unearthed Jessica Cruz graphic novel, that young adult graphic novel, and Steph C did the art on that one. And I said this when I nerd commended it. Those kind of big picture splash pages. It's almost like a watercolor aesthetic to Steph C's artwork. That when Jessica was like encountering these Mesoamerican deities, like you inject that ability and those huge sweeping kind of viewscapes with the Tiger God, with the Green Lantern ring. I'm like, this one visually is the one I'm most excited about.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to take something that's supposed to be pretty tech based, like the modern Green Lantern rings, and then infuse some spirituality into that. I think that would be a really interesting approach to that. I think there's something really interesting here, man. I'm gonna have to think about this one. I'm gonna have to let that sink in. Like this, there's just something really fascinating about that sort of merging. Yeah, I like this.
All right. Now, our third ones, we really just went for it, both of us. So what is your final amalgam character, Dave?
Yeah, so my final amalgam character I'm referring to as Rage, and it's a merging of the Kate Spencer version of Manhunter from DC and She-Hulk from Marvel. So I really like both of those characters and their legal entanglements. So just to recap, She-Hulk is obviously an attorney, defense attorney for the most part. Um, and Kate Spencer is an assistant district attorney, and her whole thing is that when she can't get the criminals into jail. She knows that they're guilty, but they get off on a technicality or something. She goes in as Manhunter and manhunts them, I guess you could say. And so I thought it would be fun to take that sort of basic setup and then infuse sort of a meditation on anger into that, right? So you have a lawyer who is working as an assistant district attorney, and her anger at the failures of the legal system triggers her, hulking persona, which I would call rage, and she goes after, people that she believes are guilty and that were able to play the system. And there's fun to be had here, not just with like the basic setup, but also I think there's a lot of opportunities in this kind of setup to critique, the failures of the legal system in a broad sense, right? And so you have a setup for a story that can be really satisfying because Hulk smash, but also really thought provoking. And so when you have this kind of character that is dealing not just with rage, but also with female rage, right? I wanted to have an all-female team on this for sure, and I figured the best writer for something like this would be Kelly Thompson. I think she would knock this out of the park, and I don't think there's anything really more gorgeous besides maybe Dan Moore and Jamal Campbell art. like all of these artists are so fantastic that I picked this time around. I can't pick a favorite, but Sarah Pichelli would be fantastic on something like this. So I really like merging them sort of on the level that they're both lawyers, but then use that to explore the legal system more. I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah, as a former pre-law student and real legal eagle courtroom drama lover, like I'm here for this. You can see that in my next pick as well. Like we had a similar kind of vibe going. I absolutely love this. I don't know a single ounce of anything about Kate Spencer Manhunter other than you nerd commended her book before as like this diamond in the rough, like this unknown thing. But I do love me some She-Hulk, and Kelly Thompson can write the crap out of a strong female character, and Sarah Pichelli makes beautiful work. So I'm here for this. It's on my pull list.
Haha, I have captured your attention, sir. All right, your final one also goes sort of into the legal area. I'm really interested in this. Dare I say that you have some kind of weird three-way going on here, Kris?
Baby. Yeah, so this is my biggest like fever dream one. I needed a third one, and like this one's incredibly ambitious, but I just went for it. I was like, you know what? This is like my last Hail Mary. To go for the Catholic vibe here as well, both from my audience and one of the characters that I'm making an amalgamation of. I'm going for an amalgamation of characters that I just really like. I really like. I love Dick Grayson and I love Scott Summers. They are two characters that I love so much, and I was like, there's still another element that's missing here. Let's bring in good old Matt Murdock. So yes, this is a three-way amalgamation between Cyclops, Nightwing, and Daredevil. And the initial premise that I went for, what started was I wanted to do something with Dick Grayson. I was scouring the DC app, like I said before, and I was like, I got to do something with Nightwing. I know that we had a really fun one that was not tapped into enough, in my opinion, with like the Moon Knight Nightwing, whatever they named that character. That was a really fun premise, and so I didn't want to retread that, even though it was left me wanting more. And then I was like, what Marvel counterpart does Dick Grayson have? And I immediately thought of one of my all-time favorite characters, like a top 2 character right now, all-time comic books for me, Scott Summers, Cyclops. And what do they have in common? They're the, for lack of a better term, they're the eldest child in their respective families, who became kind of disillusioned. I don't know as much Dick Grayson, but I know Scott Summers was disillusioned with their leader and kind of broke out on their own. Scott, much more radically so. But I think there's something that I just relate to so strongly in that, as being the eldest child and kind of being a people pleaser and doing what the quote unquote right thing all the time and not seeing a return on that investment. And then under further introspection, seeing that like these things that were being upheld as like the quote unquote right thing to do were there were cracks in the foundation there. And there were things that were wrong about upholding the past. And so like those are 2 characters that I wanted to immediately blend together. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do power set wise? And that's where Matt Murdock comes in. I think it would be fascinating to amalgamate this character, have the Daredevil going blind kind of scenario. And then you have like, you always have like, also have like the eye-centric power with Cyclops. And so like you have the blindness that kind of leads into these eye beams that are concussive, but he still doesn't have sight. He has to rely on this radar sense. You have the acrobatics that Dick Grayson's into this, and that street level vigilante type of character of kind of smushing these 3 characters together. And just to go for it with maybe this is too cheesy, but being blind, the character's name is the Justice. Justice being blind, I went for it. And then my creative team, there are a precious few things that I miss more about the aughts or the tens even than Matt Fraction writing Cyclops as this strong second generation leader who's trying to do better than the predecessor and kind of course correct from the hypocrisies of the previous generation. Yes, anytime I get a chance to call out Charles Xavier and his gaslighting, I will do so. And so I need Matt Fraction writing me some Cyclops infused character. And then Pepe Larraz and Marte Gracia. Like, one of the best things about this new era, even if it's coming to an end now, has been the tag team. I'm including my colorist here. Pepe Larraz and Marte Gracia, like just the dream team that they are together, and like the spectacle, the visual spectacle that they're able to create, and kind of taking them from like this grand scale of like the X-Men books and writing all these aliens and bringing all that energy to a street level character, and kind of putting that under microscope. I think it seems fascinating to me. So this is my Charlie Day, Always Sunny, like conspiracy theory, like pulling my hair out kind of idea, but I just went for it, man. I'm just combining all the things that I love in comic books and going for it here.
It's definitely a fever dream of merging. I'm a little disappointed that merging 3 male characters together is not giving us a female character with her butt hanging out. But
what?
Well, I mean, you got to remember Dare from our Amalgam run from Assassins, right? I mean, you merge male characters, you get a female character, and she doesn't have pants, right? I mean, that's how this works, right? Man, I tell you what, the 90s have not
listen,
taught me
the
well.
buns,
completely...
Dick Grayson's in there, so insert Dick Grayson butt joke. So
that's what we do, right? Dick Grayson butt jokes. Yeah, so this sounds actually really interesting. I'd be very interested to see how this works in execution, because there's a lot of really fun elements. I almost feel like this is sort of the kind of story that would work much better in a longer run than in like a
Oh
one
yeah,
shot, which is
I need
perfect,
give me a
right?
12 issue. Give me a 12 issue. Yeah.
Because the whole point of the Amalgam books is that they're supposed to feel like they've been running forever and will run forever, and I think this is really the perfect setup for something like that. So I'm here for this, man.
All right, that wraps up our Byword Big Talk of our Amalgam characters. What characters would you create? Be sure to share them with us on our socials at Nerd Byword. When we come back, the hostile takeover and removal of nerd commendations continues with Nerd Nightmare. All right, we are back for our final segment, but it doesn't really feel fitting that I introduce this segment as I am the victim here, so I am punting it to you, Dave.
You're punting. Well, what can I say? It is time once again for And this time I had to mess up Chris good and proper with the 2003 remake of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, starring Jessica Biel, Eric Balfour, Mike Vogel, Jonathan Tucker, Erica Learson, and Andrew Bjarnsky. I mean, I swear to God, I'm very bad at names. Here is the official synopsis. In this remake of the horror classic, a group of young travelers, including Aaron, Andy, and Morgan, come across an isolated rural home while driving through Texas. Unfortunately for them, the decrepit house is the residence of a family of deranged backwoods killers. Most notably, a hulking masked brute known as Leatherface, who begins to hunt the stranded youths down. Will any of the friends survive the nightmarish ordeal? As mentioned, this movie was released on October 17th, 2003, and it is a remake of the 1970s original film Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which was directed by horror movie legend Tobe Hooper. Chris, I am very, very interested to hear your reaction, especially after we exchanged some interesting text messages as you were watching it. So what was your reaction to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2003?
I just want you to know how strongly I am trying to keep this family friendly rating we have on this show. Before I dive too deep into my reaction to this, I want to shout out one of our favorite programs, Riff Tracks. I don't know if you've seen this episode of Riff Tracks, but they covered like what I can now see as a horrible ripoff of this movie with Tourist Trap. Have you seen that one?
I have not. Now I really want to, though.
Tourist Trap is like they go to this like little tourist trap, and it's very much the same thing. Like weirdo in the basement. Yeah. It's just added that element to it. So this one was legit scary, man. I this is one of those movies where I'm like, yeah, this is why I don't do this for fun in my free time, because it was legitimately terrifying. But at the same time, like I've talked about this 100 times on the show, it's just like now one of the best byproducts on 166 episodes now is I can kind of appreciate the creative process of something like this even more so. Like the writing on this is really, really smart, and like the things that they were trying to accomplish even outside or even in the midst of this horror film were really kind of fascinating. I'm thinking about like the reveal of Kemper having the engagement ring that was referenced early in the film. That was heartbreaking, absolutely gutting. You think about like the loop at the end was really fascinating, of where you have them almost recreating like the girl that got away, you know what I'm saying? And so like that makes you draw inferences on, there was a lot of stuff going on. I didn't really understand like the whole family aspect of it too much. I was too freaking scared. But like that, so that initial girl that they picked up was like, was she the previous one that got away? And then now Jessica Biel is this again. The baby element was weird, but like I see what they were doing there with that loop, and that was interesting. We talked about it to a great extent. The scariest thing about this movie is the fact that it would be the least surprising thing, the area that you and I live in. If this showed up on the local news, it would be the least surprising thing, because the kind of places that you see, the locales, looks very, very much like some places in the more rural areas of where we live. And to double down on how terrifying that is, I moved here from a pretty large city, but it was surrounded by rural areas in the Midwest that look dangerously close to some of these locales as well. So that was an abjectly terrifying thing. The other thing that was interesting, and kind of divorcing myself from the horror of it all, the interesting thing was how much this was a Jessica Biel vehicle in 2003, and just kind of transporting my mind back to 2003. She is coming off of Seventh Heaven, leaving one horrible monster, and the guy that played the father in that show came out to be in real life for Leatherface. So from one monster to another, it was interesting, and like how she was the final girl, whatever. They also did this creepy thing, if we're being honest, of putting her in a white tank top and getting her wet as wet as possible in as many scenes as possible. So there was the whole wet t-shirt fiasco that they are wanting to do. Very 2003 of them. Yeah, this was, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. This was legitimately terrifying. But yeah, I guess also like the torture porn of it all is still something that kind of rubs me the wrong way. Similar with last week with the Evil Dead. So yeah, legitimately terrifying, and also shouts to Aaron, Jessica Biel's character, for for pulling a Jamie Lee Curtis and actually doing something against the bad guy, because I thought that was the end of it, when she chopped his arm off. So that was interesting. But yeah, also terrifying because Jedediah looks like one of our students. So yeah, this was legitimately scary, man.
Yeah, rewatching this reminded me of a lot of different things. Number one, Jessica Biel is really good in this movie. Like, her performance is really spot on. And as somebody who had absolutely no connection or like of that television show she was on, and really
dodged a bullet there, buddy.
I openly mocked that show quite frequently. Actually, I knew some people who watched it, and I was like, this is the most, I don't even know. I cannot get into it. It's just not for me. But as far as I was concerned when I saw this movie, she just came out of nowhere for me and absolutely blew me away. Like, her performance in this movie is really, really good. And I know she has had a decent career in the last 20 years, but it's just surprising to me that she did not really blow up after this movie, because her performance is just it is spot on.
Also real quick, R. Lee Ermey of Full Metal Jacket fame as the sheriff / older brother,
so good in this,
so incredible good. There's some uncomfortable moments. There's a use of a homophobic slur. There is some sexual assault stuff, but I mean, like, this is a villain, but yeah, just absolutely cooked in this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing I had forgotten is how high quality this movie is in the horror movie realm. Generally, when you talk about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre as a franchise, there's a lot of really weird movies in that franchise. So most people, when they talk about legitimately good horror movies, they talk about the first one from the 70s. But I think this one goes really underappreciated. I think this one is a really qualitatively, and also how well it holds up, especially considering it came out in 2003. I mean, we're talking still, it's been 20 years. This one holds up shockingly well, and is probably my favorite entry in the overall franchise. That being said, I am a lot older now than I was back then, and my attitude towards some of these things that happened in this movie is significantly different. And I had a similar experience watching the newest version of The Evil Dead recently with my wife, and I think we've just come to the conclusion that as you get older, the horror movie franchise becomes less and less appealing. I don't know if that has to do with the fact that we're getting older and death is on the horizon, so to speak. The transient nature of all things, blah blah blah. Not to get too philosophical, but I find myself enjoying the spectacle of these deaths significantly less than I did as a young man. I think maybe the very, very gory horror movies might be more a game for the young, and the more cerebral horror movies might be something that I tend more towards these days. Ghost stories and that sort of thing I find a little bit more interesting these days than these sorts of very gory slashers. So I can't deny that this was a great experience in the theater, and it's a really, really good movie. I still recommend it if you like this kind of horror movie. This is top of its game kind of stuff. But I don't think it is something that I'm going to necessarily revisit very often, just because of how I have changed in the last 20 years. So it was a very weird experience rewatching this, because this was one of my favorite early 2000s theater experiences. I saw this in a dark theater with a really good crowd, and it was very, very tense, and I have very fond memories of that. But rewatching it, I'm like, the person that I am now does not enjoy this nearly as much. Here's that nerd Dave getting old, I guess.
No, a couple of final things. Shouts to Eric Balfour, because he usually pops up as like a co-star in like some random series that I'm watching, and I've always enjoyed him. I also always mistook him for one of the guys from LFO. That's a real late 90s, early 2000s callback.
Holy smokes, dude.
If you like girls that wear Abercrombie and Fitch. So I always got him mixed up with one of the guys from that group. Also, that eardrum scene absolutely shook me. Like I threw my phone as I was watching it. Yeah, got me. And then I think the scariest thing, and I think the best thing about this movie, is the whole documentary aspect of it. Is because they told you what was going to happen at the beginning, and I was like, that's a bold move. Because then you have like this sense of dread for the entire film, because you know what's going to happen, and then to kind of put that on the back end of that, and then you have Leatherface revealed to like attack the real sheriff at the end, was just absolutely terrifying. So that for me was the best element of the entire movie.
It's a very smartly made movie, top to bottom, absolutely. And it's probably going to be as far as like outright scariest messes with your head movies, this is probably the scariest one on our list.
Okay, good.
For this year. The rest has some interesting moments, and there's some very interesting setups going on, and very, very fun debates to be had about them, but I don't think they're nearly as scary as this one. This is probably the scariest out of the batch for this year.
All right, so I survived that experience without wearing a tight white tank top too, so there's that.
Or a diaper, for that matter, right? I mean, alrighty.
Well, that wraps up another episode of the Nerd Byword podcast. We thank you so much for your support, and thanks for listening to us rant and rave about the things that we love. If you enjoyed what you heard, please be sure to like and subscribe on your podcasting platform of choice, whether that is Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or our own website, nerdbyword.com.
And find us on social media, whatever social media you are into these days, because God knows there are options. You can probably find us there at Nerd by Word, and individually at that Nerd Dave and at that Nerd Kris. We'd love to hear what you think of the show and some of the things we've been discussing this week.
And if you have ideas for a future episode, you can always contact us at nerdbyword@gmail.com, unless you're one of those crypto bros that keeps filling up our inbox. Everybody else, stay well and stay nerdy.
The Nerd Byword is written and produced by Kris and Dave, two nerds with a love of all things pop culture. The podcast features music by Al Jimenez with additional drops composed by Joe Biondi. Our show art is by Ashery Design. Find us at nerdbyword.com and wherever podcasts are available.